you. Thanks, everyone. Thank you for being here on a Monday night, maybe after work, maybe a busy day. But I appreciate that you actually care to write your story. That's amazing. That's wonderful. We're going to talk about the structural edits and your voice as a writer, as an author tonight, and see how we can also emotionally support ourselves, because this can be an emotionally really powerful and charged process for all of us. Yeah, if you don't mind to share the slides.
Sure.
Thank you. So we are week 2. This is the second week out of 4-week workshop. Last week it was if you joined us last week, we talked about overall everything, like a whole structure of the memoir. And then today we are going to focus on, like I said, memoir, the writer's voice, the structure of the memoir, the structural edits, and emotional supports. But before we start, I'm curious if anyone is joining us for the second week. Is there anything you like to share from your experience, if or your thoughts, or if you started writing, or if you made any changes on your previous writing because of last week's workshop? I would love to hear that. Or any thoughts, or even if a question comes out. Yeah, Catherine, please.
So initially, I'm Kat or Catherine, either or. Initially, I was feeling kind of overwhelmed about, like, I set up like an overall structure. So I was feeling kind of overwhelmed with like all of the ideas and all of the potential that there could be and all the different routes that I could go. So I was feeling a little bit overwhelmed by that initially, and then also emotionally. But Claudia and I are friends, and we're in the workshop together. So we planned to get together to write, to go out, like get coffee and write. So I found just making a plan like that, or going somewhere, and even though the structure initially overwhelmed me, it was something for me to kind of like hold on to once I did start the free writing. So I found that, like, once I was sitting and had the notebook in front of me and started, kind of that overwhelming sensation, fortunately was bypassed, and I did get some writing out, and I'm just trying to work on not judging the quality at this point, I guess. And Claudia has been a good help to talk, back and forth about that kind of process of like the expectations versus just beginning.
Wow, thanks for sharing. I'm so glad to hear that. Yeah, that's important to have a support. You just said so many different great things about writing. You two support each other. You found a structure like a coffee shop that could help you, and the notebook you want to write, so many different points that are all are bringing everything together for you to feel more safe to start writing your story. That's beautiful. Do you think that this is, yeah, and the fact that you said you don't want to judge the quality of writing, if I will double check if I have her book as in the sources, but I think it's Anne Lamothe, I think, that writes about writing a memoir. I know I have her book. It just skipped from my mind what the title is, but she introduces the very first shitty draft to us. That's like just right. Don't worry about it, because we will talk about it today as we go through like what is a voice of a writer, that you will have so many revisions, and that's supposed to bring more and more and more clarity and wisdom out of it. And you're already starting with a lot of wisdom. That's wonderful. Thank you. Anybody else likes to share, or any thoughts, questions? Okay. All right, thanks for being here. So let's start our slides tonight, and then I will stop every few slides, after every few slides, to make sure that if there's any comment or any thoughts, we can definitely talk about it. Thanks, Adrian. Yes, bird by bird. Thank you so much. Yes. Yeah, that's the book. And that's an amazing book. I highly recommend reading it now that you're thinking about writing your story, or you are already writing your story. Okay.
Wait. Okay, sorry, it says that screen sharing is paused. I'm not quite sure why. Hang on one second.
Sure.
Okay, hang on, this isn't really what we want. I apologize for this.
No problem, not at all. Meanwhile, maybe if anyone has any comments on what do you think is a voice of a writer? What is your voice? What do you think about it? Oh, that's another good book. Thank you. Oh, well, okay, let's just see what I think about voice, and I would love to hear from you. So if we can actually skip this slide, this is what we just talked about. Thank you. So the voice of a writer, I really like this little definition from Carlow University, and I'm going to read it for you because it's a kind of like it brings a lot of different things together here in one sentence. A writer's voice refers to the stylistic mix of vocabulary, tone, point of view, and syntax that makes words flow in a particular way. I really like the way that it puts it together, and I'd like to add that it's also your personality. If I just ask, what's the definition of love? Each one of you has a different definition. Each one of you would define it differently from your standpoint, from the lenses that you see the world. And most probably none of them, or I want to say definitely none of them are wrong. So that's why that even a similar story can be told by two different writers in very, very different ways. Or if you talk to other people about your memories, they can remember memories differently than you can, which we will talk about it. But overall, it's your voice. But we have to also understand that when we start writing a story, we are telling a story that most probably is not public. And it's like, or at least even if it is public, I'm bringing my own lens to this story. And that's where your voice comes in. It depends on how you see what happened, how much you try to expand your perspective on what happened, and also basically like how much clarity you want to bring to the reality. I don't know if that makes sense, but most probably this is something about like that the voice that you even repressed for many years, and then you decided, you know what, I want to talk about it. Is it a repressed voice that, you know, for an event that happened in your life or in your parents' life, in your grandparents, friends, you know, whatever you're talking about it, there is probably a chance that you have that repressed voice. So, like Kat mentioned, don't worry about the very first draft that you write. That's probably just all the emotions that are coming out. And that probably is the most drafted voice that you have on this. But what happens is the more version of your writing you work on, the more edit you do. Each version brings your voice a little bit more. Actually, if we can go to the next slide, I think I jumped ahead of myself. Yeah. I just want to make sure I'm not forgetting anything. And what I mean by the more that you talk, that you edit, the newer version brings more of your voice, is because the more you write, the more you think about it, and then you go back and edit it, the more wisdom you're bringing out, the more basically it jumped out of my mind, the more kind of like it's the values that you have, and you wanted to see what happened to those values. Did I stand up for them? Did I not stand up for them? If I didn't, why? If I did, why? But then at the same time, it's kind of like, why is because of the dynamic that you were in it, or the person or the protagonist was in it. And then you want to kind of like sit back and imagine that dynamic, the impact of all different variables of that dynamic, and you bring more and more wisdom and clarity to it every time you edit it. And it's kind of like your voice comes out a little bit more. Sometimes we are afraid of what would the reader say. Sometimes we are afraid of, like we talked about the fears of writing a memoir, like what if my family member gets mad at me? But then considering all of that plus authenticity, that's when you want to have your writing to come out. It's kind of like not hurting other people, or being fair from your standpoint, plus authenticity as much as you can. That's what a voice is. The more authentic voice you have, the more connection you make with the readers. I do remember that I had to make or I had to search and learn a lot about like psychology of like abuse in a relationship, or male dominant culture, or kind of like mother-daughter relationships, so much that to see what happened and then go back and edit it to kind of like bring that dynamic and a little bit more authenticity every time. So that's why it's very healing, because it helps us to bring our voice out, to actually develop our voice, which could have been repressed for a long time. That's the healing part, because it connects you to your inner power, that, oh, I see what happened. So I think this is all about voice. I have, if we can go to the next slide. Oh no. So this is a an article. You see the link in the very first line, different writing voices. This person has very good examples too. What I just did is, this is all from this article, And I just made the list of what this article is talking about. But it was very interesting. You know, we can have different voices at different times, but we always also have a dominant voice. Whether it's kind of like, you know, we all know cynical people, or like people with cynical voices. We all know people with like always like that life hack voice is very interesting to me. Kind of like they always have something to tell you about how to make things easier. Or motivational voices, you know, some people always have that tone of motivation in their voice. So pay attention to it. I'm not saying that write with any of these voices, but knowing about them and having awareness of what voice is coming out or what is my dominant voice, that helps a lot to kind of like gauge where you are talking, and if you have blind spots, if you are masking something else because of domination of another type of voice that you have, that all helps you to bring more authenticity into your story. Thank you. Any questions, any comments, any thoughts about voice?
Oh, just a quick question. What's the listicle voice?
Oh, you know, the very new, not new, but when you search in Google about anything, it's like, here is the top 10 movies that you have to watch. Here is the 100 top like places that you have to go. It's kind of like it always gives you a list. And some people do that, you know, like this is what you have to do. 1, 2, 3. And we do that. You know, sometimes we also do that, but some people are really good at it. But I have to actually admit that when those come up, when I search for something, I actually read them easier because I can just read the titles and just grab something that I want. But overall, they are not very deep. Thank you. Anybody else? Angela? I want to say it's kind of like a little bit of motivational when I speak, though. But in my book, I can tell you what I tried to stay away from it, and that was like a voice of a victim. I didn't want to have a voice of a victim. But did I use a voice of like a transformational voice? I hope so. But it was maybe I don't know, actually. I like that question because maybe I focused on so much of not coming out as a victim that I forgot to kind of like bring the transformational voice. But I want to say that the transformation came out of it maybe more when I started talking about my book, like in the book events and everything. But you develop your voice. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we don't want to use it. And I think I have it in one of the slides later, but we definitely don't want to come across as a victim. Definitely. Yeah, we have to be very careful about that because we want to show the transformation. We want to show what changed in us. That's basically the whole reason that we are writing, right? It's kind of like I was here and then I went through all of this, and this is where I am with all these more resilient. So that's very important, and everybody is able to do it. You know, imagine just people who were like in, you know, I don't know, like some of these really hard conditioned refugee camps. They still, as they are going through, even when as the same time that they are being traumatized, they are still building some resilience. And if they get help after that, if they have the chance to get help, like emotional help, psychiatric help, then they see that it wasn't just being a victim, it was also becoming more resilient. And every one of us has that in us. That's who we are today. And if we are today here to think about that, I want to write my story, that it's very healing to see what are the strengths that you built over time. The story structure, this was actually last year. This was in one of the, I think in the 4th session, but I was reviewing it and I was like, you know what, this is a better place for it because it's a big question. We did have a really good discussion last year about it. My memoir is chronological, and you probably read a lot of different memoirs or even novels. It's like all chronological, but recently there are a lot more creative kind of like braiding structures. So I highly recommend to read different books with different structures, but like the ones that I see a lot now, it's like where like the story is told from this character and then the next chapter is from the next character, and then it goes back and forth. Or there's like this one that the story is told from 14 different characters, and at the end they all these stories come together. Or where like A and B structure, where A is now and B is the past. Like I talk about now, and then I talk about the relational past. It's instead of having backstories, or instead of having flashbacks. You can also, that's what I was trying to do. You can also like start from a very important event and then go back. The one that I remember to recommend is Cheryl Strayed's Wild. If you've read it, it starts from somewhere in the middle when she loses one of her boots, and then you read, and then it goes back all the way, and then you read it all to the end. It's now it has become very creative. People are just using amazing type of structures, as long as you can manage the story string. You can manage to have the reader with you to follow the story and the characters. Come up with anything, you know. It's now a kind of like a very trendy thing that people come up with all different structures. I know this can be very daunting. This can be kind of like bring a lot of questions to your mind. Is there anything anybody likes to talk about? Any thoughts, any concerns? Hold on, I didn't see the whole thing. I think Kat has a question. What advice do you have for not coming across as a victim, but still allowing the narrator to come to terms with abuse, trauma? What if you are writing from a point of initiating change, but you're not yet at the point of transformation? Whew, yeah, that's a great question. I mean, my heart feels it. When you maybe writing this story is the whole transformation. Maybe when you start writing it, at the end you'll see the transformation, and then you can write the end later after you wrote the whole story. But let's say like maybe an example, maybe a personal example can help here. You see, like when I got married for the second time, which was absolutely wrong, and my daughter was really like, my daughter from my first marriage was really in a bad situation because of my second marriage. My second husband didn't accept her, didn't like her. In so many cases, there was emotional abuse. So I could just go with that, right? I could just say that he was a jerk. He just did all these emotional abuse. He didn't allow me to bring my daughter with me to the United States. But then that makes a victim of me. However, what was the whole, that's when we see the dynamic. The dynamic, I was born and raised in Iran. So the dynamic was the whole culture was creating this male dominant men with like that mindset that I am the power, I'm the owner of my wife, and also there are always virgin girls for me, so I'm also basically like doing a favor to this woman that I married her, being divorced and having a child. So this is the mindset of the man. Where was I when, and I was born and raised in that culture too. So I also, in a different way, knew it. And deep down, if you asked me even back then, I would be like, no, of course I don't agree with that. But deep down, it was so internalized. The whole society was telling me that, like, oh, yeah, this is the opportunity. Go ahead and do it, including my own father. That I was like, okay, I'll do it. But then imagine all the abuse and the male dominant mindset here with him. Now, what do I do as a woman? I try to start manipulating because I'm a mother. I can't just not do it. I can't just put my baby aside. But I'm like, oh, this is a good opportunity. But at the same time, I'm going to do something here. And that's my way of doing it, manipulation. Now, this whole thing puts me on like as a victim, right? But when you bring the lens out that this was the dynamic of the society, this was how people actually lived and believed things, then it kind of like brings more understanding that, oh, I see, this is what it was. No one knew better. I think when you bring the lens out and show the cultural limitations, the way that the cultural demands in that particular time and that particular event, and bring both sides, that like, well, yeah, this was like a play in a like a dynamic play together, that could help not to come across as a victim. I don't know if I answered that question, but do you have any thoughts on it? Or anybody else? And that also brings the authenticity out, like if I was just going to be, oh, he was a jerk, he was doing this and this and this to me, that would make a victim of me, but then it wouldn't be very authentic, because in response, I definitely did something too, but at the same time, between the both of us, we didn't know better. We were raised in a dictatorship, under dictatorship and a male dominant culture, that this was it. Okay. But thank you. That was a good question. I hope I was able to provide an answer. It's a little difficult, but thank you. Thank you for the question. So when you choose the structure, now we have to have a structural edit. You probably hear structural or developmental. They're kind of like most of the editors, they use the term interchangeably. So structural or developmental editing are most of the time the same. So basically, when you decide to do a structural edit, it's where you want to make sure that your story flows. Your story has connections from one sentence to another one, from one paragraph to the next one, from one chapter to the next chapter. The whole story connects together. So that's where you kind of like, you may write a little bit and then go through this structural edit, but you also have to make sure that you collectively do it all the time too. So the more you write, you want to make sure that whole section that you've written are all connected to each other. A lot of time, you can hire an editor. That's what I did, and that helped me a lot. She saw things that I had not seen, it was in my mind, but it wasn't on the paper. And then she asked questions that like, what about this? What about that? So it really helped me. And then you want to make sure that the characters that you have, if the protagonist is you or whoever your protagonist is in this memoir, you want to make sure that not only that character gets developed, so as we go, we get to know this person better, but all other characters also have a story. All other characters are being developed. That's how I know is the other way that you can kind of like bring it together to make sure that every character in this story has a story and has a meaning, like has a beginning, in relation with the protagonist, and has a kind of like end. The end can be, just no change. The end, at least like it's not the end of my character, like my father character in my book, but the way that the book ends is like, for him, it's like not real change, not much change. But there are other characters that they can be transformed. They can look differently at the story because of the impacts that you and that other or the protagonist and that other character had on each other. Okay, I thought there was, let's go to the next slide. Thank you. I don't mean to scare you, but there are a large number of versions and edits that you will have to do in order to really get hold of or have your head wrapped around it to see like what it is. And at one point, you probably get tired of reading it again and again and again. And then that's where you either need a help of an editor or someone else, or you will need to kind of like rest for a while. One thing I did actually at the end of each chapter, I sent that chapter to my editor. So she read it chapter by chapter by chapter, sent it back to me, and I started working again. And then she ended up, she edited and read and edited it at the end one more time. So be careful about the pace of it. It can be emotionally exhausting too, but also like your eyes really get tired of it. But overall, every time that you go back for a new version, every time that you go back to have more structural edit, you want to see, have you said everything? Like I said, there were things in my mind that I didn't think I should write about it, but I needed to for clarification. The reader needed to know those little backstories. Like I said, sentence to sentence, paragraph to paragraph, and page to page, and chapter to chapter, they have to be connected. Every time you read, every time you are editing, I can guarantee you are going to remove a lot of words, a lot of sentences. I have a friend, she calls them darlings, little darlings, and she removed them, but she doesn't delete them. She put them in a different document because it's like, oh, but I really had a lot of, like, put a lot of time on writing it. And, sometimes you end up using it in a different place, but you will end up removing a lot of what you write. So don't worry about it. And add to it too. You want to make sure that you are communicating your writing through all the senses, with enough detail, not too much. And there are places in your story that need to move fast. There are places in your story, like special events, special scenes, that you want to slow down. You want to say, like, one second by second what happened, going through all different senses of the reader, drag the reader in, and making sure that the reader is right there with you when you write that. And I know it's not easy. I'm not saying that like this is like an ideal version of it, but everybody can choose her or his own way to develop this writing through these literary tools. And the very, very important thing that when you are writing, when, like we talked about it, going back to the voice, is so important to see if it's your voice. Is it, how authentic it is? And I think I forgot to mention it in the voice slide, but when you try to calm down, when you try to, if you believe in meditation, yoga, walking in the nature, something that helps you to drop yourself in your heart and get out of the noises and thoughts of the head for a while, you will know if it's authentic enough or not. Now, you have to be kind with yourself. Am I ready to make it more authentic? What else can I add to it? And authenticity means, like, it doesn't mean like just raw data or emotion out there. Authenticity is, what did I do? What did the other person do? How did they interact? And what was, like, the other person had agenda. What was my agenda? Because all under pressure, we all have agenda, because we are in survival mode. We want to survive. So like I said, I learned that one thing that I did was manipulation in so many different ways, but because that was only tool that either me or many other women under circumstances like that could use. So when we are under pressure, remember that, like, we always had an agenda to survive. It's not a bad thing. We just needed to survive. So it's like little by little, you can bring more authenticity in it. Any comments, any thoughts? Let me just, thank you, Deepa. Let me just read it completely. How to differentiate between an opinion, belief, when writing? Wow, that's a great question. Thank you, Deepa. So yeah, what is fact and what is my opinion, right? It's like questioning ourselves. That's part of it. That when I say, and we also have to remember that those beliefs are very internalized. Like I just said, I always, like, since I was, 14, I said I wanted to be an independent woman. I'm not going to allow any man, like, treat me like the way that my father did, my like other men in my life did. I'm not going to do that. And I did exactly the same twice because of the traumas that I had. So I was saying a different thing. I had that belief, but the other belief was so internalized in me, but none of them were facts. It was just like I was reacting to it. The way that maybe just simply ask yourself, like, is this an opinion? Is this a fact? I suppose that you are asking between the two, or did you ask about between the difference between opinion and belief? Because to me, those are very similar. Sure, I'll talk about the editors. There are several options that you can take. But if you were asking about opinion and belief, they are all just narratives in our head. But if we are talking about the difference between the fact and opinion / belief, then we can ask ourselves that, is this really an old belief that I'm still stuck? Our biases, right? We have a lot of hidden biases that we don't even know. Until a few years later, I would come home from work and I would say, oh, I'm so sorry that we don't have dinner. And then my husband would be like, why do you say that? Well, I didn't agree with that, but I was acting on that belief. That's how internalized it was in me. So at one point, with his support, I started questioning that. Yeah, why? We both worked outside. We came home. I didn't have time to cook. So why do I feel guilty about it? And it all goes back to those old beliefs. But when we start asking ourselves, what is this? Then we see that there is a narrative behind it. It's not like the sunset that is a fact. I hope I answered the question. As far as the editors, let me see if I. Oh, okay. I just didn't want to. As far as the editors, there are. Be careful who you choose, because at first I chose this person that gave me a lot of judgmental reviews, and I really felt so bad after that. I was like, whoa, I'm a loser, right? But then I found my editor through a writing club. She was attending. She was also writing her own memoir, but she was an editor. But there are writing institutes like Catapult. When you search for Catapult, make sure you search for Catapult Writing Institute. I know they offer a package for editing, and they have if it's 90,000 words, if it's 100,000 words, they have packages for that. And they have really good writers who do the edit. So I would say now I remember Catapult, but good writing institutes usually provide those, unless you don't want to self-publish it and you want to publish it. So if you want to publish it, it still has to be a clean manuscript to send it to the agent. But let's say that you have a clean manuscript, you send it to the agent, or in case of publishers who directly accept the manuscript, then they provide an editor for you. That's a lot of money saved. And they do everything for you. But if you are planning to do it on your own, good writing institutes usually provide good editors, and they have packages. Last time I looked at it was $3,000 for 90,000 words. And they really itemize everything. It's pretty clear. But if you still had the question, please email me and I will look for a few good writing institutes and I will send it to you. Thank you. And the emotional support, I still, even talking about it, I feel like emotions come up. And I can imagine how when you first start writing or during the writing, it's really, it can be really powerful emotions that they come to surface. Please make sure that you pay attention, you are mindful about the emotions that are coming up. At least you can recognize whether it's a pleasant emotion or unpleasant emotion. If it's an unpleasant emotion, how do I break it down to kind of like find a more accurate name for it? Is it revenge? Is it jealousy? Is it envy? Is it frustration, anger, hate? Allow them to come up, because that's why you're writing. But then listen to the messages of each emotion. We do actually have the emotional regulation, I think, or emotional awareness workshop that Adrian has in Fairfax Library YouTube channel from last year. That might help if you have time to watch it. Just name the emotion, listen to the message of the emotion, that, jealousy is not necessarily a bad thing. Jealousy is saying that someone is threatening you. Or if you are angry, someone crossed your boundaries. And then you bring the zoom out, you bring it out, you put perspective. When you listen to the message, then you go back and look at the dynamic to see, okay, let's see, what boundaries was it that was crossed? Why am I angry? And what was the whole dynamic in that situation? Usually, definitely, when you have an emotion come up, you also feel it in your body. There is actually no question about that. Pay attention. What is it like? Sometimes it impacts your breathing. Sometimes it's a feeling on your chest, shoulders, neck. Sometimes it's like a butterfly in your gut. Sometimes it's like your fingers get cold, your hands. So many different ways, or contraction on big muscles, maybe on your legs, your calf. Like I had someone telling me that like she could not even bring her hand up, for a few seconds. But like pay attention if there is what part of your body is triggered, and then try to kind of like calm down, deep breathing, a few deep breathing. If you need to lay down, if you need to walk, if you need to talk to someone safe, make sure that you are very mindful about the emotions that come up and how they impact your body. So you don't re-traumatize yourself in case if you are writing about something heavy. And of course, I can't put enough emphasis that like I personally had a therapist, a coach. They helped me a lot. Writing friends, supporting each other, that helped a lot. So it's important to have a supportive team. It's kind of like really, it's healing, but it's a rough road for many of us writing a memoir. Any question, any comments? All right. As far as writing habits, I really like that Kat started actually with her beautiful comment, sharing with us that like, we two go together to a coffee shop. It's important that you have a place, even if it's at home, even if like a lot of people like to go to a coffee shop and sit and write. Some people like a very like quiet corner. It depends on how you feel and how you want to do it. But find a little place for yourself that or a little situation. There are certain sofas that I can sit, or certain chairs, or I'd rather to stand and type. Find which one would work, which position, which corner, which one would work better for you. Sometimes it's good if, like, sometimes I rather to read a poem. Sometimes I rather to just read a little bit of the last parts that I wrote. Those are things that can motivate me and kind of like break that fear of like, oh my God, I want to write again. And sometimes it just comes out. It's just like you can't stop it. Make sure that you write regularly. It's because, you know, that part of your brain starts practicing and it becomes more familiar. I don't want to say it becomes easier, but it becomes more familiar. So it's like it builds some strengths around writing for you. Don't force yourself to write everything in the way that you structured and like, oh, I have finished this chapter, I have now to start the other chapter. If you feel like you are not up to it, write about something totally different. Write about the chapter 20 instead of chapter 15. Don't worry about it. Eventually it all comes together, but don't be hard on yourself. This is a very delicate process. And also I want to make sure that I emphasize on reading other people's memoirs or novels, because in writing a memoir, you use a lot of literary tools that are commonly used in writing fiction too. So it's a nonfiction with literary tools that reading other fiction, the fiction books are also helping you to see how the character development happens, how they explain scenes. Like I remember someone was telling me that he had to go and read a few scenes of The War and the Peace by Leo Tolstoy a few times because it was similar to what the scene was similar to what he was writing, and he wanted to get inspired from it. But then you can see, like you read different books and you see if you agree or disagree, you get inspired, you learn something. Would I do it differently? It's overall it's like a brainstorming when you read other books from this lens. It's helpful. Thank you. So yeah, I just suggested a little practice for next week. If you want to write a draft, or if you have a draft, go back to it for an edit, to seeing like how you want to develop your voice, your characters, or the structural edit, like the connections, the moving of the story, how many words or verbs or sentences would you remove, or even like a chunk of the story, what would you add to it? Are the speed of the story good? Just from that standpoint, you can review it. And next week we are going to talk about characters. So I provided a link here, and if you can like watch, or you can like not watch, but think about two of your favorite characters in a book or in a movie, and kind of like analyze the character and the character development. So if that helps a little bit. And I would be really happy to listen to you, and if you can share it with us next week. We do have a couple of comments. Thank you. Microsoft Word. Microsoft Word is what I used, but there is this other software that I do not remember the name. I'll ask my friend, because a lot of writers use that, and I will send it to Adrienne. So when she sends out the slides, I make sure that other software is also there. And thank you, of course. Thank you, everybody, for being here. My information is there. Please feel free, if you like to ask any question, chat about it, let me know. I will be happy to answer. I do help writers as a coach. So if you felt that's something, that's a route you want to go. And other than that, I just want to thank you for being here. And also thank you for writing your stories. Your story matters. We all need to share our stories. I appreciate your thinking about it and you're doing it.
Oh, thank you, Shabnam, and thanks everybody for being here. Yeah, I hope you all can come back next week, and I'll send out those materials that Shabnam was talking about. As soon as I can.
Thank you, Adrienne. Thanks for
Can I ask a
hosting.
question?
Please.
Can I ask a question? So
Please.
as we're writing, I'm using something called what's it called? One or 1A writer. But when we're writing the story, and you said, okay, if you're not comfortable with one piece, you can come back to it and go to another piece. So how do we keep all of these pieces together? I don't want to just dump it all in one document. Like, do you like put it out in chapters, or what's a good way to kind of organize that writing?
Well, yeah, that organization is also very personal, but the way I did and worked for me, I had each chapter in one separate document. And then at the end, I copy pasted in one document, all of them together. But I also had an Excel sheet that kind of like had a lot of different fields for each chapter, like characters who would come in, or events, or things that I wanted to make sure culturally I talk about. Like I also had that that actually doesn't relate to what you just asked, but I had everything separately in one separate document, each chapter. And my chapters were years because it was chronological. So that also made it a little bit easier.
Okay. Thank
I
you.
hope that helped.
Thank you.
But with that other software that I now cannot remember, that has the capability of connecting everything. That's why a lot of writers use that software. I'll make sure that I'll send the name out. I'm so sorry that I don't remember. That helps a lot with that.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Of course. Thank you.
All right, thank you everybody for coming, and thanks again, Shabnam. We really appreciate it.
Of course. Thank you, Adrienne.
Sure.
Bye bye.
All right,
Take
hope to see
care,
everybody next
everyone.
week. Bye.
Good luck with writing.
Thank you.
Thanks.